Back not by popular demand, but because I have another deck, we are going to test out another shape from Clutch Woodshop. So this time I decided to be a little less boring and got my daughter to draw on it. I'll show you guys a close-up of this at the end of the video. So let's start with the measurements. It is 31.5 across. So 31.5 across is a pretty short deck for a guy like me. 8 inches. 8 inches, 8 inches. Wheelbase is 14 inches. So we got a 14-inch wheelbase on this one. So that's short for me, but hey, the good news is 360 flips. Nose length is 7 inches. Tail length is just under 6 3/4. So it's gonna feel like a bit of a short tail. Fingers of flat is almost 3 fingers of flat before it goes up on the tail. And we have, I'd say, about 2 to 2.5 on the nose. This deck is gonna pair nicest with Thunders, so that's what I'm gonna ride on it. And like I talked about in the last review, it says something on it. This one says 5C. So I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe I'll get that information from the wood shop and talk about it before the end of the video. Well, it's been a long time since I did that intro, and I have no idea what I said, but when I first started out riding this deck, I started riding it on Thunder 147s, so a pretty small truck. So as you can see, I've been having a lot of fun on this deck. In fact, it's actually kind of made me fall in love with a 14-inch wheelbase. I mean, watch this trick again. So that is a 360 flip. Now watch it again. It's 360. So what you guys don't understand is I'm a chronic like 340 and 320 flipper. I can never get the full rotation and I always make it up in loose trucks. But as soon as I'm on that 14-inch wheelbase, I can spin them all the way around. So while riding this deck, I was starting to get used to a shorter deck with a shorter wheelbase because this deck is 31.5, which is quite short for me. So I thought. Midway through riding this though, I got impatient and put on another setup and I started riding an 8.25 with 8.5-inch independents. And once I stepped back on this setup again with the Thunders, it just felt unrideable to me. So I set up indies on this board. So the footage from here on is indies. The downside to that shortened wheelbase and lack of like heavy responsiveness is my tricks can get a little floppy and unpredictable. Let's try and straighten out those heel flips a little more. I kind of have to sacrifice pop and leveling out for consistency. So it's sort of like a 94 goldfish heel flip. All this modern day effort to pop a heel flip isn't paying off. It's time to go back to the early 90s switch heel. The shape of the nose and tail is my favorite shape. It is that perfect popsicle stick. So it's neither a full nor pointy. It's just got that perfectly pleasing popsicle stick shape with kind of a shortish tail. The manual point on this deck is also really good on both indies and Thunders. No struggles whatsoever. So let's see if I can work on some of those manuals I've been trying. Not bad for a workday morning, I suppose. So the indies totally changed the feel of this deck. And the best way I can describe it is it still felt really nice and flippy, but what I all of a sudden couldn't do is I couldn't get onto high ledges very well. There was even a couple times where I actually tried to ollie onto high ledges and my board just wouldn't come up with me, so I bailed. So definitely this deck is best suited to Thunders or Ventures, some sort of low truck with a wider wheelbase. If I had to pick apart anything about this deck, there is one thing. And that is, there is a trend in having the wheelbase be not centered on the deck. So for example, there's about 2.5 fingers of flat on this side from the bolts to the tail, and on this side, there's about 2. So there's roughly a 1/2 inch difference in how much fingers of flat there is here. Now what that does is it makes it kind of feel like 2 different boards. So the nose has the kind of pop that I'm used to and that I like, and the tail has a shallower feel. But it wasn't noticeable enough that it was a big problem for me. So really quickly, let's take a look at this Solace of Mine deck. Now this one has a solid 3 fingers of flat at the tail, and it's got almost nothing. Like it basically starts to go up right at the bolts there. So this one literally is like 2 totally different decks from the front to the back. Now on another positive note, while I may have struggled getting onto tall ledges, which I found a little bit frustrating, one of the major benefits of having a setup or a deck like this is actually doing flip to slides on lower ledges. So as you can see, I'm still working on some of those. Now, to finish up, I actually ended up having a phone call with Julio de la Cruz, and I don't know what his exact role is at ASF, but anyways, it was a good phone call. I asked a few questions about the deck. He told me a lot of stories about what he's been doing. Now, Julio used to ride for New Deal way back in the day, and the way he explained it is, instead of going out drinking and partying with all the guys every night, what he was doing is he was hanging out with the people that were making decks. So he was learning how to make decks from people like Paul Schmidt way back in the day. He also spent 5 years working at Bareback and now works at ASF. So he has a long history of working with skateboards. He also has a channel I'm gonna link in the description below, and you guys can also find him on Instagram, and that's also in the description below. The quality of the wood seems pretty nice. I'm quite pleased. Like, they're crisp, snappy, poppy decks. Even though this was a mellow concave that was pretty shallow, like, it's got a light, poppy, snappy feel. And so did the other one I rode, and so does the program deck that I've been riding that is also a clutch deck. So wood quality is good. I wouldn't hesitate to ride another one of these decks. They also provide a huge amount of boards to Latin America, from Argentina up to Mexico. So that's one of their primary markets, is making sure that all those guys have boards. And you can imagine it's probably kind of a struggle to get boards into a country like Venezuela at this point in time. So anyways, there's a little bit more about ASF and about Julio, the person who I got these boards from. So if you're interested, check out the links in the description below. I think it's probably a good choice if you're looking to start a small brand. And this is also a really good reference for any brands that are made by ASF and distributed by Clutch. So if you're wondering about the quality of the wood and the shapes, it's probably pretty darn decent. At least my experience on the 3 decks I've had that have come out of there have been good. Now, one thing I want to quickly admit, you guys, is I don't break boards. Now, I did land really hard on this thing a few times where I thought it would have broken. It didn't, but I'm not a board breaker. Basically, since boards have gone to 8 inches and up, I can't remember the last time I broke a board. I used to break them when they were 7.5s. I don't break 8-inch boards. So that is probably a whole lot of talking. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. I'll see you in the next video. Except I don't. I see a lens. That's what I'm looking at. A black void-like lens. And then I see your comments. So that's what I mean. See you in the comments. So I gave my eldest daughter, who is 10, complete artistic control over this. I kind of was hoping she'd do like just one big drawing of something, but she sort of likes to get into the minutia. So what do we have? We've got some unicorns, a building, somebody singing. So these guys are actually blushing bottoms. They're fart clouds shaped like bums. They're not what it might look like. What do we have there? Some dancing thing, trees, sun. We've got something eating the cotton candy bush, and the elves are really unhappy about it. And then we've got a bloody Elsa singing Let It Go. Pac-Man is hungry. And it's raining tacos. Yes, so if anyone's seen that, it's raining tacos. That's what that is. So this is what happens when you give your 10-year-old complete artistic control over your deck. And I think it's a good improvement over the blank deck just on its own.